So, Sally, so lovely to have you on the Integrative Medicine Matters podcast.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Really, really feel that in my heart. So good to be here with you, and especially so much that the diploma's given me through my career. So grateful for all you're putting out into the world.
Great. And we might have a wee chat about that as well. But
Mm.
I wanted to start with this question about why does integrative medicine matter to you?
So I suppose that word matters. It really makes me think of, okay, what's most important?
Mm,
And for me, I really think one of my key things I value is freedom. So there's
mm,
a beauty in my work now that I'm not defined by rigid protocols. I can really see the person in front of me in their totality and all those beautiful things that come with human beings and where they're at. And that really then gives me the ability to have that freedom to meet them where they are and bring the medicine that feels most right for them in that moment. So really, when we use that term integrative, it's weaving together all these different approaches, whether that's the pharmaceutical side of things, but also the lifestyle context and these deeper parts such as our relationships. So yeah, for me, that's why it makes such a difference to the care, because it really allows people to get exactly what they need. Why not make the most of all these beautiful medicines that we do have available to us?
yes, I love that too. I feel that integrative practice really brings joy because you're never bored. Everyone's an individual, and also it's creative. Because it's almost like you're coloring, aren't you, with all the potential approaches and knowledge, but crucially, you're kind of presenting them to the person, and then they can create their own story and what's really important for them. So, yeah, lovely to
Mm.
hear you say that. And tell us a bit about, I know we're going to go a bit deeper, but just tell us about functional medicine and how you see that sitting in the integrative medicine model.
So I mentioned that really the big start to this career integrative medicine was through the diploma. And I just remember learning about all the different approaches and being so enamored with all of them. I went on a few years of what I call course addiction, just wanting to train in so many different modalities. But the one that really caught my heart was functional medicine, because it so beautifully spoke the language I was already speaking as a conventionally trained doctor. So the language of modern science and mitochondria and microbiome, which is having all that increasing focus, but it brought this really holistic way of seeing the body not as isolated organs, but that all the organs are interconnected. And that to really create health, we work to see how everything is feeding into each other, essentially. And through that, we can, instead of just the name it and tame it approach, as it's often called, where we're just giving a drug to reduce symptoms, we can actually get to those root causes, so these deeper factors which lead to a more sustainable health.
Yeah, and you spoke at our integrative conference around testing in integrative healthcare. And although we can sometimes think of functional medicine as kind of finding something that might be out of kilter and then correcting it, actually, what you did was brought a beautiful kind of depth, like a spirituality to the way that we would see every individual and interpret their words, their data, their movements. Say a little bit more about that because I think it's very important for you, isn't it?
Yeah, so I suppose in that definition of functional medicine, what it really is a framework. So it's something that helps us to actually map out somebody's symptoms and how we're going to approach that, and through that create health. So for me, if you think about it, we have kind of all these different tools, whether it's the surgical knife or the framework. In, for example, functional medicine, we use the nodes and map out the different functions of the body and how well they're functioning. And it really depends how you're using that tool. So you can use the tool in many different ways. You can use it as a very sort of aggressive, go in there, cut it out, or a much more sort of wider, holistic, is this the right time? What is going to support the healing? And so for me, it's been so helpful, again, having that integrative approach to functional medicine, because I think there's always potential risks of everything, isn't there? And I think you can easily switch over from conventional medicine and just instead be replacing medications with supplements. But actually, there's this real potential when we bring this deeper look at what are the core principles that actually really create health, and how do we integrate that into something like functional medicine.
And that timing is so important, isn't it? Because we may bring our distress to the practitioner, but an understanding of that distress or disease can in itself take time, even to sometimes identify or clarify a diagnosis conventionally can be sometimes really important because we have the time frame, don't we? But then also that journey towards kind of owning what's happening and looking at balancing and realigning. I mean, how do you see that? How do you hold someone in that journey where actually they may want you to fix it and the timing of getting to deeper healing? How do you kind of see that whole thing?
Exactly. And I don't put that, I really do recognize that most people who first come to me, because I've been in that position myself, really. I think that gives a really different level of understanding going through my own health journey. And I knew at that time, just I'd take anything to be better and be well. So I really didn't mind. I just wanted that fix. So I think a lot of it is initially realizing, okay, there's some simple things we can do just to help you feel better. And it helps to have that sense of security with a more rigid protocol, for example, might be exactly what someone needs to feel like, okay, this is the clear steps and have that confidence. Lots of people have done this before. This is the likely outcomes. And then at the same time, the beauty of the functional medicine is having those longer consultations. I find this really wonderful so that through that, we can actually just gently start touching on the wider picture and what else might be coming into play. And particularly in that first, when you do an hour and a half initially with someone, so they make their own connections in terms of, okay, actually, it's really starting to click together how actually all these various things in my life have potentially impacted how I'm feeling now.
And Sally, just tell us a bit about your personal journey as a doctor. Where did you realize that you kind of wanted more? Was it at medical school or as a junior doctor, or where did it happen for you?
I suppose, I mean, that there's two big events that really changed the course of my career. One of them I said was becoming unwell, which was quite a sudden event that when I look at it, the actual health and what was actually going on the side of the illness itself was such a small part compared to the suffering of going through the uncertainty and realizing, okay, there's so much more to health and how much I valued health and really wanting to start, I suppose, preventing illness. Essentially, it made me realize how much I love life and that I wasn't ready to do, I really wanted to take care of myself. And then also the second thing was I found myself in New Zealand, and it was just one of the healthiest times I'd ever felt, just so, alive with nature and a beautiful routine and healthy foods, and with a friend who I really cared about. And that time, I often think it really helps to go outside of your familiar routine and environment to start actually opening up the mind to, like, okay, what am I doing? What path am I on? And what other possibilities might there be for me? So I think that was a really key turning point, was to reflect on what is it about this and how I feel now. And I realized, okay, I'm so into the creation of health and what it means to really nurture this state of feeling nourished and good and well-being.
Yes, and that health, that mind, body, spirit health, it might be cellular or relational or so many different things, but it is a beautiful thing to either feel growing health in yourself or to see it in another person. And I think that, as you know, with the master's program that you did with NCIM, we would study models of health and well-being because I've often felt, you don't jump on a bus that doesn't have a destination. Just tell us a little bit more about health and how you see it, how you perceive it, and how you work out whether it's improving for someone.
I feel little tingles of energy. I love this question. I feel like I've been working with it for a decade now, and it just unfolds more and more and more. It's sort of like that. My other one is like, what is love as well? It just goes deeper and
Mm.
deeper and deeper. And you realize as well, like a word is just, it's not the thing itself. And so a lot of the way I approach it now is like, what is my really direct experience of health? So I experience it as this very dynamic state of resilience and a feeling of, it feels of just well-being. And I think what I'm landing on now is like there are so many different components of health. So there's the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. So actually you can have various diseases or ailments going on in your body, but still feel incredibly healthy if you have this sense of inner stability and resilience that comes from these deeper places. So I think, for me, it's this sense of real, almost aliveness, and that sort of vitality aspect, which we see in a lot of different complementary approaches around the world really plays into it as well.
Yeah, and I think I used to say with the teaching that the way to trouble doctors is to talk about energy, to talk about, energy medicine but that word vitality, just reflects us as energetic beings. And we can kind of drill down to our mitochondria, but that's just one element of an incredible orchestration that can create a sense of well-being. And those kind of rhythms in the body, circadian rhythms. I wondered about your take on this complex system, how you approach that, and knowing that we can't cover all the bases, can we?
Exactly. Yeah. Someone once pointed out to me that with parts work, I have this like extremely skeptical science sort of doctor part that just doesn't at all believe in energy. But then I'm also the sort of maximum woo woo, like there's nothing that you could say that would surprise me or that I wouldn't also believe in. So I think that's really, it feels like that word dharma comes to mind, that this is really what I have to offer and give to the world, is this bridge between the two, that I know what it's like to hold the two sides of
Mm.
that. And as I said, in a one-to-one, it's really meeting someone where they're at, and it's just gently opening up to the language. We can get so put off by the word like energy because we've read about all these different things about what that means. But it can be as simple as just asking someone and being curious about them. What does energy feel like in your body? If you think about that word energy, what, for example, if you were to say high energy, what would that be like in your body? And actually suddenly there's a truth there for them of like, oh, actually I would feel a little bit more lifted. Or if I was low energy, I would feel like I didn't want to move off the couch. So it's working with someone's actual understanding of that concept themselves and having that curiosity to not be so prescriptive, I guess, to just really actually recognize the power and intelligence in someone and help nurture that within themselves, because that's really what creates sustainable health. If we just, particularly in functional medicine, I've noticed if we just give them the 3-month gut healing protocol and then say off you go, then they'll develop some other thing down the line. So we need to actually be helping them recognize and understand how to maintain health.
Yeah. And I noticed you talked about love that we could discuss, but I'm also very interested in joy, like the word enjoy, to enter into joy. But I also noticed with some of my patients that seem to be really deepening in healing, they would talk about feeling blessed,
Yeah.
and I would sit there thinking, wow, you're healthier than me, because that they might have a really difficult diagnosis, but there would be moments of feeling blessed just dropping into their day like stillness, So it's a
Mm.
beautiful thing when you start to see that, isn't it? That spirituality. And I wanted, if you don't mind, I wanted you to share a bit about your own spiritual journey.
Yeah, so I suppose, I mean, it takes me back to, as I said, I was unwell and that was a very challenging time for me. I thought I might die, had a
Mm.
loads of health anxiety. And at that time, I did start meditating, and I was just reflecting on it the other day. It was on another podcast, and I almost just felt like the tears of gratitude and that blessed feeling. And I feel
Mm.
that now in my heart. It's just
Mm.
like a really strong sense of gratitude, essentially, for what happened to me, which when you're in it, if anybody listening is in the thick of it, like don't expect that to happen when you're in it often, but it really can actually just open us up to something, because it shakes everything. It shakes the familiar and really brings us back to what's most important. And that's a real window of opportunity to actually, for me, to connect deeper to what's true and what to my actual sense of authenticity and self and what I cherish and the love of life itself. And I mean, yeah, there's the emotion behind that, right?
Mm.
There's so many beautiful gifts that can come out of going through these challenges. And so I definitely connect with that. And it's been a very long journey of, ups and downs and being curious, exploring. The meditation side of things was a big entry route for me. And I started doing that because of the health anxiety, but then really clicked at one point. And that was another big sort of expansion into feeling, I didn't even know I could feel this good sort of feeling, because we get used to whatever level of health we're at, but that just brought this whole new level. And I almost quite effortlessly notice these various things, such as drinking excess alcohol or craving sugary foods, just started to fall away, because actually I was so much more connected with my body and what really mattered, and that sense of resiliency that I mentioned, that actually I didn't need those things in the same way anymore.
Yeah, and I think in many of the podcast interviews, we've returned to this idea of connecting to the body. And I see that as one of the most important things within the integrative medicine model is that, the body is wise, the body will lead us, but we have to spend time arriving into the body and to connect. And so that process can be very painful and beautiful and frightening, but it's about that curiosity, isn't it? What's there in the body that can allow us to feel more authentic in ourselves?
I've been reflecting on this because I've done a lot of work with the somatic therapy over the last few
Yeah.
years, and really just seeing the role, and on my own journey as well. As I said, the key, I started with a Vipassana meditation. So that's scanning through the body, which allowed me to reconnect with actually
Yeah.
feeling my body, because before I was completely up in my head. And
Oh,
so that was a big way also I recognized that my body signals of like, oh, actually, okay, when you do that, that really doesn't feel good for me. But what I realize now, as I've continued to evolve this process, is actually the body's actually quite neutral, and there is an incredible intelligence behind it. But it's also like we can't tear apart the body, and actually a large part of our cells, which acts through the body, this sort of presence, experience of presence starts to come through. And initially we feel that through the body. And as it expands and gets wider, we actually realize that it's even greater than ourselves. And that brings us towards this more spiritual understanding of the unity, which we see across, many different spiritual traditions, that really at the heart of it, there's something within us that we share.
yeah. And that connection to something bigger than ourselves, some of the science is showing that's really important for health and well-being, is those people who kind of spend time in awe or wonder and just allowing ourselves to be in the midst of something much more interconnected. Because I guess one of the things, again, the science is telling us is that isolation is one of the worst things for your health. And that isolation can be within society and community, but also within oneself, feeling I'm alone with this distress. And I guess that's one of the first steps with a compassionate clinician, is just to say, you're not alone.
Exactly. Yeah. And just to touch on that ore, I loved that paper that you put out around the science behind it actually reducing the inflammatory
Mm.
markers. It's so exciting to see those evidence-based signs of how these can help us. But yes, that's absolutely right. I'm very interested in compassion as well as a medicine. And what it really is for me is it's helping someone to be exactly where they are. I think that is very much a big part of what spirituality is learning just to be exactly where we are with our direct experience. And I think that can be really powerful within the healing journey, where a lot of the time, as you said, people come in and they just want to fix it. So there's wanting to get rid of something, but the more we're just constantly trying to get rid of things, there's this tendency for more things to just come and pile up. So actually what I found on my own journey is this deeper understanding and flow, which is really mirrored through understanding how, for example, emotions or tension patterns or reactions, feelings such as aloneness, how they manifest within the body. And the more we can actually just allow them to be, we don't need to do anything. They just naturally transform. And this feeling of just more of a release, it feels very healing, whatever is happening in the body. And yeah, I think there's a real potential to shift that as well over to the healing of, for example, an illness. How can we, instead of just saying this is something to be removed and fixed, actually, how can we work with this as a message that actually this is something that the body's trying to alert us to, that there needs to be some sort of change. So how can we become curious about that and what might unfold out of this?
Yeah, and I know the power at the moment of accepting where you are can be so difficult. I've had an unexpected relational stress just before Christmas, and the thing about when something is really, really hard is sitting with it and accepting it, whereas there's this impulse to escape it. And I know that Thich Nhat Hanh talked about, you know, sit and don't look for the exit signs. But when the going gets tough, that exit sign, you're drawn to it. And if that exit sign is major surgery on the spine, when actually it just needs time and rebalancing, harm can be done. So for me, that spiritual practice, which I too developed, at a time of, deep post-viral syndrome that I had about 11 years ago. Now I'm using it again, where I just have to sit with it. And I heard a beautiful thing with Tara Brach. She said, don't oppose anything. Don't fix anything. I just wondered what you felt about those ideas.
It can be so powerful. And I think for people that are maybe just hearing about this and saying, okay, that's all I need to do, I think one of the pitfalls to maybe avoid is that we can go towards trying to force ourselves into acceptance or compassion. Of like, I just have to be here with this. And that's actually the opposite of not resisting, because we're
Mhm.
resisting that actually there's parts of us that are just like desperately terrified. And all I want to do is just get rid of this. So we want to, and even just being with that resistance or whatever it is, it really is just whatever's right here, right now. Really, just for me, whatever word resonates with you, for me it's love. So just loving whatever comes up and what's here right now, and that's true
Mhm.
compassion. That it's not that we often think of compassion as this sort of gentle, flowy, nice, kind touch, but actually when needed, it's got that energy to actually really be more strong or assertive and say boundaries, or just to really have that protective fire of like, gosh, no, it really sees, it has that attunement. I see you're really, really suffering here now. And all I want for you just to really just allow you to be with that, to bring us deeper into that sadness that allows that sort of release of tears or whatever it is can be so, so helpful and healing for people.
And it sounds like we might both be doing some internal family system part work. And I'm just thinking of, the scientist and the woo-woo healer in your own space, and how those two parts could, be at war, but with love, with compassion, they're both allowed to speak, aren't they? They're both allowed to express themselves, to be useful,
Exactly. I think, yeah, I find it absolutely a fascinating form that we have all these different parts within us. And it helps you get to know yourself better, to realize that actually it's okay to hold two contradictory views. Because most of the time that's very, very challenging. But once we actually recognize that it's okay to bring those two voices into the field, then actually it allows a lot of these more subconscious feelings or thoughts to come to the surface, where actually there's that freedom for them, rather than for example, sabotaging our good intentions to eat well or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that freedom is super important, isn't it? And I've discovered my fixer part, fixing, 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 and health coaching, in the health coaching conference. I felt like a horse at a stable door wanting to canter into fixing. But you've also done some health coaching. How do you see that interface between where you might stop recommending and move more into enabling? I don't know, how do you see that?
I mean, right now, as I'm seeing it, it's bringing me back to that metaphor you used at the beginning of the sort of artistry of brushes, of painting,
Mm.
that actually it really is medicine as an art and a science. And how can we actually begin to paint that picture? It's almost like a dance, that we're really responding to what's coming up in the moment with the person. And there's so many different factors that play into that, which I think I can just feel in my own experience over time as you learn and explore different approaches or how things land. Or for me, the embodiment, I guess, is one of the key things. How much am I doing that within myself and meeting myself where I am? And for me, increasingly, what I'm noticing is there is this somatic intelligence that's developing, so that I can feel Maybe it's not right for me to do running or eat this vegetable every day. Actually, I'm working with exactly what my body needs in that moment, and then that spills over into my consultation. So I feel that increasing ability to really support someone in their process of recognizing what do I need most right now. But I'm sure there's a long way to go. It's a long journey of endless discovering and exploring different ways to dance that dance.
But the non-doing takes a lot, the idea that you're not the clever one, you're not the one with the ideas. The other person is going to come to it. And that can be a merry dance sometimes, but it feels to me like you've really learnt to quieten yourself in order to receive the other.
And I feel like I'm not quite there yet. I absolutely have the strongest fixer. I think for doctors, it's a really strong part. But I think the more we do explore these and understand them and see them. So, for example, I do quite a bit of Gestalt as well. So you actually sit and take
Mhm.
the places of both part. So taking the part of, for example, the doctor. So in this case, it was more the drama triangle. So you take the helper, take the victim, and just feeling, actually for me, gosh, the helper feels very familiar, and how powerful it felt and how stable it was, a much more comfortable place to be, rather than this idea of being with the person who's needing help. So I recognized in myself, gosh, my role in itself of trying to fix is perpetuating my own sense of being okay. So I think even having that understanding on the subconscious level, it maybe changes the way you relate to others, of actually just seeing through those various coping strategies allows me to show up more as just a human speaking with a human and recognizing their own potential and power. I don't
Yeah,
need them to fulfill that role of the victim for myself.
yeah. Very, very important that, I always find it amazing. As a palliative care physician, I asked for supervision in my training, and I was asked, have you got a problem? And I said, no, but I want to reflect on what's happening in the dynamic of meeting my patients. And, I find it really curious that we're encouraged into minimal kind of psychotherapeutic or therapeutic approaches as doctors. I'm glad to say that in integrative medicine, we're encouraged more into self-reflection, self-care. But I still feel, as you were saying, you can use a technical functional model and just replace conventional medicines with supplements, or you can have that as an option, but move into this much, much more dynamic phase of what does the person actually need at this point?
With that, that's really reminding me of the rise, which I feel is coming, of the divine feminine.
Mm.
Actually, it's a very masculine healthcare system, and this has nothing to do with gender. It's more of that sort of analytical, logical, straight approach. And what you're touching on with that desire to actually start reflecting and seeing the complexity is this more feminine approach that I think is really missing and needed, because it's almost like the healthcare system's become so successful that we're now getting so unwell because we're not recognizing those other parts that sustain health. By just the sort of the quick fix approach, we need to actually look at how the whole system is interconnected and sustains itself. And so, I hopefully, it still feels like integrative medicine is so small, but I think it really does reflect that more feminine, intuitive approach really increasingly coming in, and not to the exclusion of the masculine. It's how can we integrate and recognize they can hold space together, dance together.
Yeah, I think that's the beautiful idea. But then I get disappointed when I see the weight loss drugs and amazing technology, but then used to kind of drive economic success for the companies, and not seeing it as, a sharp-edged tool that needs to be used very, very carefully in the context of a much deeper relationship with food, how we sustain ourselves. Again, this idea of, are we happy? I was thinking, of that love of life, and that phrase, a zest for life, that orange zest, lemon zest that will kind of open us up. So it feels the opportunities to drive the complexity are often squashed by the simple fix-it tools, that make money.
It is that underlying approach. It just seems like everything has the potential to do harm. I often see this in the health world with foods, like even the broccoli we could say is, this or that. There's nothing that doesn't potentially harm us. So it really is that deeper diving. How can we reflect and see the deeper layers of this to actually realize it's nothing to do with the tools. It's how we're using them and why we're using them, what's driving our behavior. And I think we are getting pulled more and more into this, it's a sort of the quick fix, or the attention economy, high dopamine type things that just really are providing us with that pleasure, or the consumerism. And how can we actually open up into something that I suppose that takes me to nature, that actually is taking us back to presence, essentially, and really, for me, our truth of what we are.
Yeah. And you've talked, haven't you, about illness as like a threshold for potential change, perhaps, like in the model that we would love to see more of. You'd be listening to the body and symptoms much earlier as a threshold. But I wondered if you might talk about that a little bit more.
So I don't know, sometimes I often feel maybe certain people are attracted to you, but definitely with the type of people I am working with, a pattern that I'm noticing is just how important it is to be able to reduce our stress response in the body. That's such a big barrier to healing. And as you say, there is an intelligence that runs through the body and it wants us to heal, but it will always put survival above healing.
Mm.
It's always much more like, what's my immediate threat? So it's going to, or if we're stuck in that fight flight state, it's really going to put any of that healing to the side and be like, not right now. I just need anything that's going to keep me alive, which is like reducing digestion, get the heart rate up, get me breathing faster, all the things which actually tend to lead to more tension in the body and really reduce that zest for life and vitality. So for me, whilst I work with people one-to-one, we've also now got a group program running alongside so that people can learn these skills where you are learning how to, often people say regulate your own nervous system. I don't like the word regulate because I love freedom, but for me, it's like learning how to connect with greater ease in your body. So just the simple act of just feeling your feet on the ground right now, or just having a look around and seeing the colors that you see, or just paying attention to your senses and bringing yourself here into the moment. And it's just little switches like that really just help bring the body back into that state where we can best support health.
Yeah, so important. And I love this idea of group medicine just because there's a lot to convey, and we can convey it in a group. And does the group give each other kind of support as well?
Yeah, so we will do a mind body skill development practice at the beginning, and then a lot of opportunity to share. So just really this opportunity for whatever is there for you, like everything is okay, a very safe space if you just want to kick or scream or cry or complain. And people have been wonderfully vulnerable and open, speaking about their challenges and their health. And it's just so wonderful to see the impact that has on everyone else, how much they resonate, how much you can just see that compassion there for them. So even if they don't say anything, you know that actually it's touching on them, that they realize, okay, I'm not alone in this. I think that in itself can be so healing, because we often do, that it can feel so isolated and that we're in our own suffering, but we realize, okay, there's actually so many other people going through this same journey, or a little bit further ahead as well, which is wonderful to see that potential of like, okay, no, I can get through this. I can recover from this.
And what would you say would be your favorite kind of de-stress? You were almost getting us there, weren't you? Feet on the ground and starting to, be aware of your environment. This can be kind of life-saving at moments of high stress, just kind of coming back down. But I wondered, what are some of your favorite approaches that you like to leave people with?
I mean, the breath is so powerful. If I was thinking of others, I'd say really just some sort of way just to, for example, breathing in, counting to 5, breathing out, counting to 5. Even if that's a few moments through the day when you're doing that, we just know that has such a powerful impact on the nervous system. But again, I always like to individualize it. So for me, as I said, I tend to get very up here in my head with all this excitement. So it's really helpful, something that helps me come back down into the body. So feeling the feet, like going for a walk and just pushing my feet into the ground, feeling that contact, or even a little bit of self-touch can be really helpful. Movement can be really nice, just gently moving the legs and allowing yourself just to be there with whatever's there for you, just as I said, with that attitude of curiosity.
And with that, we're kind of done a little bit of focus around spirituality and healthcare. Do you support people into certain, like in NCM, we've run mindfulness for cancer and mindfulness for stress, 8-week programs based on Vipassana or insight meditation. Do you also have, things that you like to recommend?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, there's so many different things that come up that I feel that I've learned on the spiritual journey, but are so, so relevant to the health journey as well. So, for example, the inner critic, like how
Mm.
much does that apply to our health and how much we beat ourselves up once we learn about all these wonderful ways to support our health and then we're not doing them. So,
Mm.
that's one of the really key places to start is recognizing ways to do that, recognizing ways to increase self awareness, the compassion we spoke about, learning about this principle of acceptance and flow. So yeah, there's so many different ways that what we can learn on the spiritual journey applies to the health journey as well. So I'm sure that increasingly I will be integrating that into my work.
Yeah, because sometimes I'm aware of, just again, this timing that you talked about, that, I'll write a letter and we'll recommend this and we'll recommend that, and the person will come back and say, "Oh no, I didn't do any of that." So it's that meaning making that can happen at the time of the consultation can in itself illuminate. But then what's hard for us as human beings is to stay with it, to stay
Yeah,
with things that help us stay in balance or stay in flow.
exactly. So I mean, I do quite like taking a more target approach to actually exploring the barriers. So one of the key spiritual paths I'm with now, the diamond approach, is very, very helpful at actually identifying, well, what is it that stops me from experiencing compassion? And we use the inquiry process to actually go in and realize, oh, okay, it's because when I was compassionate as a child, that was frowned upon or looked as soft and too feminine. And that actually I need to be strong and hard and assertive and just you know, not cry or express my emotions. Once you have that understanding and it's seen, the barriers tend to melt away, and then we slowly increasingly develop these capacities.
And it is always lovely, isn't it, when barriers melt rather than kind of forcing them down. It's always lovely when we look back and just think, I'm doing it differently, and I wasn't even kind of trying.
Exactly. That word trying is, yeah, I don't think I've ever, managed to accept something. It's actually once all we're actually doing is just creating the conditions where
Mm.
acceptance can occur. And it's almost like it's not us that's doing it. It just then starts happening. So in the same way that if you were to cut your arm, it's not us that actually heals the arm, but we can do certain things that allow that healing to come about by like not poking it or putting a plaster on if you're really dirty.
Yeah, and where I feel a lot of tension is in the jaw, where I can feel my survival thing you talked about, my body going brace, brace. And so, I would say as well, I'm sure you're like this, that just the awareness takes a long time before the letting go. Just that's why the body scan can be so helpful, because it was the body scan that taught me where I held a lot of stress. So I guess the other thing with that kind of journey is it's an opening to something without a defined outcome, which can be uncertainty, can be dysregulating, can't it? And yet it's something we're trying to encourage in the spiritual path.
Yeah. It's a very powerful healing principle, is to not have a particular outcome of where
Mm.
we want to get to, because physiologically that just creates the feeling in our body that there's something wrong, that we're not there yet, that I have to
Mm.
be there. So actually the more we can just come back into the moment and the ways that we are safe and the ways we are manifesting health, then actually this can be much more supportive for us, and then we just gently go through the process of taking the supplements, of getting support from others without desperately clinging and striving for something.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? So we're coming up to the end of our conversation, but I just wondered if there was anything else you wanted to share with the viewers and the listeners.
Hmm. Just that my heart feels so full. It's almost like it's dancing. Like I am so passionate about this work and the potential it has for all of us just to really expand into a greater sense of well-being. So thank you so much for having me here and for sharing this discussion together.
And it has been a joy to watch you move through all your learning and acquisition of knowledge, but then to see it expressed in such a dynamic way. You know, when I was with you at the conference, what I felt sitting alongside you is better. And I
Mm,
think, you know, that kind of resonance of doing the work, and I know we call it work, but just the allowing means that it doesn't stop you being the most incredible clinician and you can understand that and do that and that. But the felt sense is, you know, one of I'm going to be okay. So it's been wonderful to watch that in you. So thank you very much, Sally,